Since I got into the modeling hobby about 6 years ago, one thing that frustrated me was the lack of tools for painting and detailing models. And over the past couple models that I did, I think when I did the Bowser RS3, I'd finally had enough, and I decided I needed to do something about it. And here you can see, a couple of examples of recent models that I've done and what I had to do to paint them. For the RS3, I took a piece of pink foam, jammed it up inside the shell, and put a stick in it to use as a fixture for painting. And with this dragon elephant, well, I just picked it up with my fingers and painted it, and painted my fingers at the same time. And for the past 6 years, this is how it's been. And after doing the RS3, I decided I had to do something different. Now, I'm not an expert in Blender, and I'm not an expert in 3D printing. But I know enough about Blender where I can make it work to some point. So what I did is I designed all these pieces to use in painting models. Now, these are all individual parts as part of a system, and I'll kind of break this down into components. Now, this part here is an expanding clamp. So I'm going to show you the clamp. This is the exploded view of the clamp. Now, these are all the individual components, minus the adjustment screw and nut and washer. The adjustment screw is a 1024 machine screw. It does have a 3D printed knob, but these are the individual parts that I designed and printed for the clamp. And this is the clamp in assembled form. Now, the purpose of this clamp, I designed this clamp to be used inside of locomotive shells when painting. So you turn the adjustment knob, the clamp expands and grabs the inside of the shell. And here's an image of the clamp. And here I show you with the clamp installed inside of a locomotive shell, and then the clamp expanded to grab the shell. Next is this articulating ball. These parts work together like this. So we have the dome over the ball, and then there's a stud here, or a post, on the top of the dome that fixtures mount to. So the dome fits down over the ball, and then the dome can rotate plus or minus 30 degrees. Here are a couple images where I show the articulating ball and how you might be able to use it for painting or weathering your models. Now, depending on your application, this small round fixture here I designed to be used with armor models. It's 1.5 inches in diameter, and if you drill a hole in the bottom of a tank hull, put a threaded stud through here, you can secure the tank hull to this fixture, and then you can use the bases and the pivoting ball if you need to Now for other applications, you can use this 4-inch diameter disc on top of this smaller fixture for larger objects, like, for instance, some smaller HO scale structures, or whatever the case may be. And here are a couple images of how you can use that small diameter base, and then you can see the larger diameter adapter attached to the small diameter base. And you can use that with whatever need arises. Next, I designed this rack and these adapters. Now this rack and these adapters were designed for use with rolling stock, with model railroad rolling stock. If you remove the trucks from the rolling stock, you can use the screws that attach the trucks to the rolling stock, run the screws through these adapters, screw these adapters to the bottom of your rolling stock, and then bolt the rolling stock to this rack. And here I'll show you some examples of how that works. Next, I designed this larger rack. And this rack is for use with long rolling stock, which I don't have any, or locomotives. Now the way this would work is these two arms will fit into these dovetail joints on this centerpiece. Now the length of this rack is 12 inches. And that's too big for the print bed on my printer. But this rack, once it's put together, will fit an AC 4400 modern locomotive. I don't know what steam locomotives would fit on it. I don't have any steam locomotives. But it's much larger, or much longer, than the rolling stock rack I showed you earlier. It's about 4 inches longer. And I made some special adapters here to be used with it that are a little more structurally substantial for the weight of a locomotive. And this end of these adapters is the same size as a KD draft gear box. So if you remove the draft gear box from your locomotive, you can insert these in the locomotive, use the same screw, and attach these to the locomotive, and then attach the locomotive to this rack. And here I'll show you a couple examples of how that might work. And lastly, I have the bases. Now this base, there's no riser. This base has a 2.5-inch riser. Now these posts on top of the base, here and here, can be used with any of the fixtures I previously showed you. All of the fixtures are friction fit on top of these bases. Now you can see a small hole here and here. The articulating ball has a hole in its base. And what the hole is for is you can insert a pin to keep it from rotating. Now that was the first piece that I designed for this system. And I found that there's enough of a friction fit that it isn't really required. So none of the other fixtures have the hole for the pin. And as I mentioned, all of the fixtures that I previously showed you can be installed on either one of these bases. So depending on what your need is, you can use either one of these bases with any of the fixtures. So that's pretty much it. I printed them out on my Bamboo Lab P1S 3D filament printer. And I think these are going to work pretty well for me. I haven't had a chance to actually use one yet, but I am working on the border model Leopard 2. And I think I just got tired of not having a good way to secure a model for painting and weathering. And so I just decided to make something. So I hope you found this video interesting and maybe would give you some ideas of something you would like to do for yourself. And thank you for watching. I hope to see you again.